Okay, welcome to the continuing story of matzos, and why we are eating them for 7 days, and it's all based on the pasuk that we're eating on them on 7 days in order to come to Atzeres, which is the last days of Pesach, and there's something cumulative about the eating of the matzos, which gets us to this state called Atzeres, which we haven't defined what it is, and we're going to now. But with just a little bit of an aside, what we're about to say is based on an understanding that we had the last time of the inverted hierarchy, in which what's on the top, the beginning is wedged in the end, and therefore the plant life, the vegetative life, which is 3 levels up. You have 2 levels up. You have the inanimate, the dirt, then the plant which comes from the dirt. And by the way, the dirt manifests it not as nothing, but it has the power within it to grow everything. Okay, and then the next level up is the plant. So we obviously got this idea that implicit is that the lower it is, the more latent and when released, the more powerful the energy there is. And therefore, the plant, which is the grain, has something to give to us who are even higher, because it has this greater power in it. And we spoke at length about how this greater power comes from its origin. The origin of the vegetative power, the power of growth, is in the world which preceded this world called the Olam HaTohu. And we described the sparks of light that sparked off from Olam HaTohu and fell, giving this enormous, latent, hidden, encased power in the dirt to be the origin of all the energy that flows upward, including into man, okay, including ourselves. Okay. With that, we're going to start Ois Gimel. If you're looking inside, I don't have the page number. Ois Gimel, if anyone has it, yes? Is anyone looking in the text?
I'm listening, but I don't know where to look.
You don't know where to look. Ois Gimel.
The letter Gimel?
The letter Gimel's in the margin,
it's
and
on
then
the second page, and then there's like something, and then Hakdama or something.
Okay. You're right in exactly the right place. The little Gimel is in the right margin.
Okay.
I mean, it's sort of empty. It's in the same, it's aligned with everything else, but it's small like every other print. Then you have 3 big letters, Vav, Ayin, apostrophe, Pei. And then back to regular print, which is where we're going to begin. Does everybody have it or not?
Have it.
You have it. And you gave it to everybody. Eliza, you have it?
I will soon.
Seema, you have it if you're looking? We'll put it this way. Anyone who doesn't have it, raise your hand or yell out, because we're going to start. Okay. Okay. In accordance with the preface that I just summed up.
Rabbi.
What?
This is John.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Listen, I apologize. It's not a problem.
So, just very, very briefly, we explained that the pasuk says 7 days you'll eat matzah, and then you will come at the end days to Atzeres, a gathering place, an in-gathering like Shmini Atzeres, right? The end days of Pesach. So there's something about eating matzah that gets us to a place which we call Atzeres. We haven't learned anything yet about what it is, but it's a journey. It's a journey. We're out of Egypt then, and we're going out of Egypt now. It's a journey, right? And the end game, the destination is Atzeres, and eating matzah gets us there, because of the tremendously powerful energies And he explains it just about grain in general. But see, here we're taking a grain, and everything is commanded now about this grain from Hashem. But even on the natural plane, the vegetative level has a power to really energize and does energize. And without it, we couldn't live. And so we humans are energized by the vegetable, by the grain. And so these days are an infusion of this power, a revelation of this power, because this is the time of God's presence is revealed. And so we're on this journey internally, individually, as well as a people. Okay, now as a result of that story, afterwards, this preface, Yuvan will be understood. Gam came also, be'inyan mitzvah sechilas matzah, what is it about? Through the constructs that we just put on the table, these 2 points, we're going to now understand what's the whole deal, in a deeper sense of eating matzah on Chag Pesach, on the festival of Pesach. The Mavor Zohar, which was as explained in the Zohar in Parshas Vayetze. Yeah, on Daf Kufnun Zayin, Amid Beis. Second, if you want to look in the Zohar, here's the reference to where it is. What does the Zohar say? That in the level of physical understanding, in other words, the understanding that's available to the human being in a physical body. So just like in that level, we quoted this before, that we said the small child doesn't know really anything until there reaches a state of development in which he's eating porridge or grain, lechem, and he has to taste lechem. And we explained the reason above, and that's the long explanation I gave you now about the world of Toihu invested down in the lowest and the vegetative, therefore having the power to give life and sustain life to a being, 2 levels of being, which are really higher than it, the animal kingdom and the human kingdom. So similarly, just like that's true in the natural order of things. So when the Jews went out of Egypt, when we Jews went out of Egypt, we were like infants. We were newborn, right? And many others, a lot of Chassidus, the Exodus is called a birth, right? And total change of state. And we were infants wandering in the desert. We didn't know anything, except that God has chosen us for this, at least after Moshe told us, saying, we know we're like little kids. We were like these toddlers before, maybe pre-toddler, before you taste the taste of grain. And and so we couldn't understand our Father in heaven. So here's when we get the start of the big nimshal, the mushal, right? The actual exile is a historical event. We explained, in very little, just hardly any talk about the plain physical event, but more about what's the internality of it, meaning what does it mean, and how does it, and why is it we're doing this every year? And we said it's a big deal because this is a pathway to Atzeres. Eating matzah is a pathway to Atzeres, and now we're understanding it on the, the individual and the communal level down here, planet Earth, over, across time. So when the Jewish people went out of Israel, out of Egypt, I said they didn't know how to, they couldn't grasp with their mind the greatness of Hashem until they ate matzah, because matzah, remember, this is not just grain. This has all the properties of grain that we said. There's one big difference. This is a mitzvah with grain, right? So it has in it, it's also called lechem min ha'oretz, bread from the earth, but from bread of the upper world, the superior world, ha'eretz ha'yoina, which of course will be the source of all this. But on matzah, that's what we're eating. We're eating just like when we eat a piece of grain or vegetable, the nutrients in it are absorbed in us, So when we eat a piece of matzah, not only that happens on a physical level, but since this is a mitzvah, so we're ingesting the energetic as the energetic exists in the Oretz Elyoina, in the supernal world. Right? Because everything lives from the goings out of the mouth of Hashem. Hanim shebelechem zeh, which is in the what the going out of God's mouth is in this bread, right? In this bread that we're eating, meaning this matzah. Hashem, yeah, moitzi pi al kol moitzi pi Hashem, which is drawn down into this bread. Yichei hahodem, that's what we're living with on matzah, on Pesach. So that's the first thing to realize. It isn't just expensive. It's a special kind of a food, really special kind of food. And so we're living, we're living on lechem in haaretz, but we're living on lechem in haaretz elyoina, lechem which has contained in it down here below, its original level of residence or sprouting in godliness itself. And we live from this. And this gives the nefesh elokis. Back to our metaphor of the birth, the nefesh elokis is definitely a newborn, because in the scheme of things down here on planet Earth, as we learn in the Tanya, the nefesh hayunis comes in first. That's what gives life to our physical bodies, and then the nefesh elokis. So the nefesh elokis is really a Johnny-come-lately, so to speak, and therefore younger, and therefore really a tinuk, like a small child, who hasn't yet tasted the taste of lechem min ha'eretz elyon, bread of the supernal earth. So we're ignorant. And so we don't yet recognize who is our father, just like the tinuk, the small child with a physical father. But when we taste the taste of matzah, we have an ability to know, at least in some respects, and perhaps we'll elaborate on it, to at least have a grasp, a sense, a feel for Hashem himself. This is where we're supposed to be sitting, eating the matzah, or at least in these days contemplating what we will be doing. Okay, and just like ordinary life force is drawn l'nefesh hasichlis, to the intellectual soul, milechem gashmi, from physical bread. So kach nimshach mi'edchiz matzah b'Pesach, so there's drawn from the eating of matzah in Pesach, hayas l'das hanefesh elokis, the life force to know the godly soul. No, I'm stopping you. I'm just, though I'm sure I've been through this mimer before. It's been a while, and this phrase just hits me, that when we're eating matzah, we're getting the highest, the life force, the das nefesh elokis, to know our godly soul.
I thought it doesn't. I mean, it doesn't mean. Sorry to interrupt, but
no.
The knowledge, the knowledge of the knowledge of the godly soul, like we're
the das. Yes, he's going to explain it now.
Like, are we like? It's a way for us to have das with our godly soul.
We'll listen to him. He's going to explain it. He understands that he just made a sentence, and people would have questions, so he's going to explain it. Okay, but what did he say? That when we eat achilas matzah b'Pesach, in our eating of matzah on Pesach, this is what he just said, we get a chayas l'das, just like in regular grain, we get chayas physical life force. Eating matzah, we get a chayas l'das hanefesh elokis, a life force to know the godly soul. The Indian, what is this about? What does it mean? Ki hachometz hu b'chinas hagvova hisnasa. Think about chametz. It's high and it lifts itself up. That's a risen bread, right? That's challah. That's bread. Okay, and it has these two characteristics: hagvoah, lifting itself up, the hisnasus, and hisnasus is Interesting word. It's also lifting up, but it's in a context of, and they both are, like gava is gaiva, and hisnasis is, being overlording. That's the Indian of, he says, that's what chometz is. It blows up. It blows up and fills up, and it lifts itself up. So here we're saying, this is the introduction, is the opposite of matzah is the epitome of haughtiness and yeshusness and full of unselfishness. Matzah, on the other hand, matzah, she'en bo shum hagbaha, which has no raising up. Hashem. Okay, in period. Okay, now similarly, the avodas Hashem, chometz hu bechinas hisnasis v'gasis haklipa. When it comes to avodas Hashem, serving Hashem, so we described chometz, and what does it mean in the service of Hashem? Well, what's it be to be like a chometz-tika person? It would be recharacterized by hisnasis v'gasis to klipa, the lifting of the raising up and the elevation of klipa, which means focus on oneself. Mashenke matzah, the other hand, matzah, the two different words, the total opposite words. Matzah, which is in a state of loweredness and humility, loweredness matzah. Yeah. This is, by the way, he's describing the pathway to know the godly soul. Starts with humility, lowness and humility.
Can you just ask what line we're on? Because I have to be at work, and so I lost track of where I was. And
okay. What line we're on? Okay. Well, we're in Ois Gimel, right? You're on
that I know.
And we're going to count down in Ois Gimel. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 16. 15, 16 lines. The line begins with hisnasis. Hey tov nun shin al hisnasus.
And then
Vegasus.
Okay, I have it. Thank
you. So we're talking about chometz is hisnasus. We'll just repeat that line. It's not raising oneself up. Chometz raises itself up. Vegasus. And we explained bread rises. Okay, it has a negative quality. When it's rising up is negative, when it's on the side of klippa, meaning it's about aggrandizing oneself, right? And that's called the hisnasis vegasis klippa, the raising up and the elevation of the klippa. Masha einkin, on the other hand, matzah b'chinas shiflus v'hachno. Matzah has the total opposite quality of lowness and humility. That's the key word, bottle. So this is, as we said, we asked the question, he's saying that we're in a state where until we eat matzah these days, we don't have a das, and he keeps using that das, about our innate connection with Hashem, that he is our father. That's his language, that he's our father. Matzah brings us about because it enables us to, and here's what he said, to know the godly soul. And what we're doing is exploring, what does knowing the godly soul begin with? It begins with shiflus v'chachno, with loweredness and humility. Batul ratzeinecha, in nullifying our will in front of God's will. Then we have a bracket. V'zeu ki yischametz libi. There's a pasuk somewhere, I don't know where. It says, my heart became chometz. You see the word, if you're looking inside, you see the word chometz. And it's a pasuk, ki yischametz libi. My heart became risen, egotistic about me, my pleasures, what I want. And that's my heart became chometz within me. So he says, Him shel halev hanayte leharoshia. So this pasuk compares the heart with this inclination to evil, lechometz, to chometz. So the Torah uses the word chometz to define a situation where one is full of himself or herself. And also we have more of this from our sages. It says, it's another place where it says, I had an ability to do something, That was koidim shehachnis, before I got grub. It closed up on me. But in other words, what does it mean? Before it rose up, before I rose up. My mind, a clarity and an openness of mind comes from lack of prejudice, meaning lack of prejudicial thinking, with complete openness to what you're hearing. Right? You get all that chametz out of the way, and this begins to now become a vessel for knowing your nefesh elokis. Achnov shiflus. This is like really like fundamental Chassidus, you know. Okay, so that's another expression. Before I became chametzik, and then there was two stages: before I became chametzik and after I became chametzik. And I'm sorry, was able to look up the reference. V'chein mashlu hayetzahora. Similarly, the yetzahora itself is compared to so'er. So'er is dough, and particularly dough that rises. Who can hold back the rising of the dough? Who can hold back that the dough should not rise? And it uses us, so that's also chametz. This is a powerful sentence because the level of the category of gasus, self-centeredness, you know, I mean, there's so many ways to talk about self-centeredness, you know, but basically, I mean, just all about, it's what's life about? It's about me and my ability to make it, as we now fill in the adjective, as pleasurable, as meaningful, blah, 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 blah. Meaningful also, but it's about me, right? So this is called gasus. It's the source of all nephilas, all falling into desires. Of course, the prohibited desires. This is the root of it, gasus. In all kinds of pra, Hashem yishperenu, Hashem should protect us. V'hini yadu, it's known. Begalas Mitzrayim, in the exile in Egypt, the Yidden were very bound down below. And even their mind, their worldview, their minds were rooted down below, and their midos also, in a state which is named, the word Mitzrayim is Metzorim, in a state of traps and boundedness. So just as we were physically, so that happens, you know, lo elena, but, you know, a person's habitat and environment has some effect on what he thinks and his dispositions and his whatever, his thoughts. So we were in a state with Mitzrayim, the country called was Mitzrayim, because it was a place of trapped. The whole civilization was trapped in a ideology and an idolatry. And the Jewish people also were drawn, because we were living a down life, into a fallen state, if you will, into Metzorim, into boundedness, the Gevulin, the limitations, Gashmias, physical, Gashmias ha'olam, Hagaremis, which caused Liyes Yesh V'nifrad. And as we were in this state of downwardness, and I just, just add a few things. I mean, about thinking about being enslaved, and just the most important thing to you is the next piece of bread, So one gets pretty preoccupied with just staying alive. About yourself. The Ikar Yetzias Mitzrayim, and the main route of going out from there, going out from that, totally bonded state of Metzorim, of Egypt, Mitzrayim, and this was that Hashem does it from up above, right? Around midnight, he reveals himself and he strikes Egypt. And what is he striking with? He's striking Egypt with the infinite light, the Or Ein Sof Baruch Hu, may he and it be blessed, which comes from a place totally above the realm of any even thought of creation. And a blast of that is coming down and totally reordering everything in creation because it comes from a place deeper than creation. And through this, nimshat behem bechinas habitul. And this, we got it. We see it. It's you can't deny it. And this it drew down to them, to us Jewish people. This was breaking the Iron Curtain. It was an Iron Curtain which envelops not only the body, but the whole psyche and the mind. I mean, it's not a, what do I say? It's no genius understands, right, that every culture you're in has an influence on the way you see things. And the culture of Egypt was Metzorim. And to get out of that, it was apparently such a deep, dark confusion, although we have some today in the world that are totally, if not as dark, certainly getting there, where lies become absorbed by huge amounts of population as truth. So we have a need to get out of Egypt, but even if we didn't, we'd have a need to get out of Egypt, because getting out of Egypt ultimately is going to bring us to Atzeres, which we'll get there, right? So we're on the road. Okay, so we were in a state of bittul, and when we saw Hashem, when we saw the revelation, we were blasted, so to speak, into a state of bittul. Ukamaimer, as the saying goes, ubamoira gadol. We were in complete awe. And the Chassidus say, well, there's a language in the Chumash of, because in the writings in Tanakh about we were in we're just saying b'moira gadol, with great awe. And he says this, and what was causing the great awe? We were seeing the divine presence, whatever that means. We're seeing it. Someone asked the question, is it with our physical eyes? We got it. Seeing is believing. And through this bittul, we were zapped, but we were in a state of zappedness, so to speak. Through this bittul and this yira Allah, this high level of awe, we were like in one fell swoop removed from all the boundaries and limitations. Likewise, Yetzias Mitzrayim Begashmius was the actual physical liberation. And when was this? After the middle of the night. Remember the different back way at the beginning. The matzos before midnight, the matzos after midnight, the matzah after midnight with a vav. And that vav is the eternal manifestation every time we sit down and eat matzah of the drawing down of the Shekhinah to our tables or wherever we're having the Seder. And so that's the matzah. This revelation happened after midnight, and therefore our matzah, etc., etc. But remember, back in the beginning, we brought out, the Chumash brings out, that we were commanded on eating matzah before Chatzos, right? On the erev, in the evening, in the day before. In the evening before, you should eat matzahs. Which already we're eating matzah, so that's accomplishing a bittul ratzon, a nullification, opening up, I would like to translate bittul here, opening up of our will to be his will. The hachno, and our humility and shiftless and lowness, it's softening us, it's lowering us. We're already eating matzah before chatzos. This man, hanimshav mibichinis yiratato, and that's producing, yes, a certain amount of smallness, a certain amount of openness, which we call the low level of awe, or fear, it's sometimes called. But in comparison, if the upper one is more awesome, this is way less awesome. But it's enough fear to say, I'm not going to do it. I'm going to do what Hashem wants me to do. And the way I like to take my own, and I think it's fitting, otherwise I wouldn't tell it to you, understanding of fear at the lowest level. And this is I've seen this a couple places, I can't remember where. That's one of my faults. I don't remember when I say things. I mean, in Chassidus, that the fear to be understood, it should be understood as like the fear of a fish to be out of water. A fish will not willingly go out of water because he has an innate sense that he'd be taking his life or her life. So that's the first level of fear that we have. That's called yirat Torah. The fear to be away from my relationship with Hashem, the fear to be out of sync with myself, and the fear that breeds more fear, the more out of sync you are with yourself and can't find a way back to that state of allness. So the state of allness is God, so that's a state of fear. The state of, I do not want to be like a fish out of water. I will connect myself with the water of all waters, with the life of all lives, which is Hashem, through observing and learning His Torah. But meanwhile, and that's the level of fear, the fear to be disconnected from the source. So Zehu Hachona, and that which we ate before midnight was only a preparation, v'hakeli, and a vessel, l'bechinas hagili v'yira ilah, to the level and the revelation of what we call yira ilah, the higher level of unity, hanimshek v'niskala lahem, which was drawn and revealed to them after midnight. V'gam, if you're having any questions, I'm hoping you've been with here enough to know that you'll be ask them as you go. I usually say that. Okay, let me just take anything. I want to take a little water. Okay, we're moving. It's really strange looking at all these microphones with red marks through them. That's all I see. V'gam nik. Oh, something's moving. Okay. V'gam nikra hamatzah b'zoya. Okay. Also, the matzah, we haven't touched on this before. The matzah is referred to in the Zohar as michla de himanuta, which is, himanuta is amuna. So the Zohar calls matzah michla, the food of amuna. So again, this is another way how we're opening ourselves up here to this matzah to have knowledge of our nefesh elokis. When we start here. Okay. I'm sorry, my page is a little bad added here. Okay. It's called in Zohar the food of Amunah. And it's the level of bittul, shabatal sichle, where one puts aside his mind, literally, the rational faculty, where one puts aside the rational faculty. The enemy tam, and is not looking for reasons. Interesting, the word tam is also taste. The matzah is relatively low taste compared to the other breads we eat all week, right? So we're learning, the matzah has a faculty. Remember, this is the spiritual faculty of the matzah, and it has many facets. And one is the bittul, the flatness, which affects a flatness, given overness. Shemavato sifloi, where one gives over and says, I'm not going to let myself just be bound by the realms of rational, intellectual being. Ve'ena mevachesh tam, and I'm not going to be looking for reasons or tastes on Pesach. Rak shemamin ha'emes ne'emuna v'hatahara. And that's what the Zohar calls. Eating matzah has an effect of putting you in a state where you can have faith, emuna, in the truth, with a pure unity. The nimshach b'china zu b'neshama, and this is drawn into the soul, this fostering, nurturing, growing of emuna is drawn into the soul al yedei mitzvah sechilas matzah, through the mitzvah of eating matzah. Who al derech, and this is in the manner sheniskala ilu we mentioned above, mashal from the mashal, if the metaphor, shalechem echayas adam, how bread enlivens a person. Who and this is what it said. What sages have said. What did they say? This is what we said before. A small child doesn't understand to call his father until he has a taste of grain. Because the knowledge, the capacity for knowledge, the ability for knowledge, and as well as the acquired knowledge of a tinuk, of a toddler, small child, to have that knowledge in order to call father. And it means to differentiate, Abba, Ima, to know. This is the first, close to one of the first things that a person knows. Likar Ava, to call his father, Achayitim, until he tastes. This ability for the child to call the father, which is something new, is al yidei shetam tam lechem, because he had the taste of bread or grain. He doesn't understand. That's true, right? You look at imagine, or remember if you can, or look at your children or other small people around you. They know that you're the father. They know that you're the aunt, tante. But what does that mean? What's the innerness? What's the teichen? What's the teichen of being a father, right? So they don't have any sense of this, right? There's no real understanding yet of a tam v'das, of the reason for this. Because in Yedea, Echu Avi doesn't know how this person is the father. And again, this is just one of many relationships that the baby comes to realize without understanding, but knows this is the father, this is the mother, etc. But he doesn't have any knowledge of this father and fatherliness, or what. I say, well, why he's supposed to love, right? You don't think about a baby thinking about why am I supposed to love this person or not? There's no thought, but there's das. There's no, this is my father, this is my mother, and this happens between us. And this is called hiskashrus. And that's one of the explanations in Chassidus of the word das, right? Which is we say, I'm translating it, and it's correct, knowledge. It has a meaning, which is hiskashrus, to be tied together. And one of the foundational things about that you learn about das is that where do we first find the appearance of the word das in the Torah? We find it that Adam, the first man, knew his wife. So it's coming together, hiskashrus, that's das. It's much deeper than and it will has other dimensions also than are just knowledge. Another aspect of it that comes to mind is hergosha. It's a feeling. There's a something. There's a thing you're going to know, but it isn't havana. It's not understanding where you understand. If I ask even color, if Tina can't even tell you color, or shape. This is a rectangle. Okay, no, it's just the relationship you have in it that's based on a as I call it, supra rational, meaning you feel tied to it, and you have a feeling for it. And there's one or two other dimensions that don't come to me. But that's das. Okay, so before the eating, is lo yagidei tam b'das. The kid doesn't have that das. Hamusabayim ki'im b'bechinas hakora. What does the child have? Before the bread, before the das, he has a kora. Simple recognition. I mean, I don't know anybody out here is a biologist, neurologist, or understands the lower workings of the nervous system and how it creates a world for a baby. So the baby has a perception, a recognition of things. But that's what's going on. That's the level that Chassidus tells us is the level of what we call a tinuk, a certain stage in development before you start eating grain and move on to have hiskashrus and to have, more recognition. Recognition, that's the third thing, recognition. You recognize, you're tied to it, and you have a feeling for it. It's das. Okay. So before that, the person is in a state of katnus, bechinas katnus, smallness, down below. Lamata mitam b'das, at a level which is below reason and knowledge. Nevertheless, hiskashrus chazak ma'oid, right? The kid, back to the baby, he has a strong, strong connection to the father, right? Ma'oid, to such an extent that at this beginning stage, the soul of the father and the soul of the baby, or the mother and the baby, are what he said, that their souls are tied. Until his soul, the baby's, is tied with the soul of the father. Because this level of das, which is something new in the small child, by tasting the taste of lechem, it comes from the shorsh, the root of the lechem itself, the bread itself, shehu ba'olam ha'tohu. So, right, this is just, right, and let me say two steps. The grain level nourishes the person, right? And the grain level is also a metaphor for great, great lights coming down low and opening up when you eat something that's made of grain. And then if it's matzah, it has a deeper level of the same thing, which is getting you to a level where there's a flattening, a given overness, a no resistance, a complete immersion in godliness, right? And this das is nurtured, we're nurtured because, and this power to do this nurturing, that's what I want to say, comes from Olam HaTohu. Whereas we say, this is the line. It comes from this lechem shehuma Olam HaTohu, this bread which comes from Olam HaTohu. Remember the high spark that fell into the vegetative kingdom. Shehu b'chinas shelamayla mehadas, which is coming from a place much higher than das, das hamusag, just understanding something. It's coming from a place even higher than Chokhmah. I mean, this is maybe difficult to understand. We have a chain going on here, Chokhmah being a das, right? And we said a lot about das. But first of all, we didn't say das is a middle kav, Chokhmah being a das. And then everything in the middle kav goes up to the crown. So crown is also, is a source of das. But that's before it becomes fleshed out, so to speak, as it comes down and down and fleshed out. And higher than das, however, in the hierarchy is Chokhmah, right? But I want to just say this in Hebrew first, that the world of Tohu is higher than that whole chain, right? And that is a level which is higher than das, than normal das, which is higher than Chokhmah, right? It's coming from a level, Chokhmah is the beginning of the chain, das, the middle kav, they all go up to the crown. And the crown is higher than the chain, and the crown is the place of bittul, where the yesh, the self, does not get in the way. You guys have nothing to say or comment or questions or anything? This is...
Yeah, I'm actually not sure what you mean by where tohu comes in exactly. I think I missed a little bit.
Where tohu comes in? Tohu comes in because tohu is the source of the highest energy that exists outside of God himself. I mean, as energy. If God is an emanator, tohu is the deepest part of himself, the most powerful part of himself. And where will you find your ability to connect to it? Dafka in the lowest of the low, which is down here, number one, planet Earth, the dirt, the plant. We're focusing on the plant because we're talking about matzah. You eat matzah on Pesach, you're getting power from Olam HaTohu. Now, is that sufficient?
Yeah, I think so. But you were talking about it, how the hierarchy is like tohu, chokmah, dots.
Yeah, yeah. Very good. Tohu is I mean, tohu. It's really even deeper than that. But this tohu is the world of where there's no order, right? But what you need to understand, though, it nevertheless it's it's the ultimate energy as we just described. But nevertheless, it's a world, and a world is something that comes out of God's consciousness in a state that's deeper than world, right? So even Olam HaTohu is nothing in terms of the divine energetic as it exists within itself before there's any creation. But having that's an aside, Tohu has bigger lights than Tikkun, which is the world we are in. And when when the world broke apart, all those illuminous shards, like sparks sparking off from a campfire, fell down to the lowest world, and they're here, down here below, in the inanimate, vegetative, animate, and then human kingdom. But the bigger sparks fall the lowest. So that's why we live from the ground, because of those big sparks, I'll tell you. And what we've been saying all tonight is just taking that whole metaphor and transferring it into the realm of the spirit. Our whole spiritual life depends on matzah. That's basically what he said. Our whole spiritual life depends on matzah. What's matzah? It's flat. It's not out for itself. It exists in a state of total given overness. And because it exists in a state of given openness, it's an open vessel for the light of Tohu, which in the normal food and normal time, you don't see that inner light. You just know, if I told you it's nutritious, well, you could translate nutritious, meaning it gives me nutrition, it gives me the ability to live, versus something that's not nutritious, which takes away my life. It's nutritious. But when you eat it invested with God's commandment, that high spark invested in Tohu reveals itself at midnight. And then every day of Pesach, we are meant, this is where it gets not so easy, we are meant to take from here you know it will be the actual therapy for getting through and achieving something of the states we're talking about here in terms of closeness to God is what starts on the second night, which is Spiros HaOmer. Counting the Omer. We're going to have hopefully at least a couple of more, because Spiros HaOmer, Yetzias Mitzrayim begins a process where the Jewish soul comes out of Gullus. It's a process that had a historical date and has a soulful, human all the time. A person is obligated, as I'll say, to see himself as he's going out of Egypt every year, every day. Because every day we're in a certain state of boundedness relative to the state of release or humility or simplicity that we could have at the next level. And that goes on infinitely. So all these Yom Tovim are instruments for avoida, when understood and according to Chassidus, which explains what's the avoida of Rosh Hashanah. I mean, what does God want from us on Rosh Hashanah? What does He want from Rosh Hashanah? Of course, Nisan is one of the Rosh Hashanahs also. There's a whole other sense of total renewal going on here, in the spring. And what is that? And that must have something to do with everything in Torah has something to do with me and you and every one of us. We received the Torah after all. Right? The angels wanted it. He gave it to us at Mount Sinai. And He gave it to us to be a I mean, I'm cheapening it terribly by calling it a therapy, an approach, a pathway. It is the pathway for wholeness of soul and body. Yeah, you have to eke it out, but thank God we've had a few hundred years of people eking it out and delivering it us almost on a, well, I'll call it a silver platter, Chassidus. But we have to get it, and we have to listen to it. And getting it also, you get it. I mean, if you're not raising your hand tonight, I'm assuming you're getting it. But even if you're getting it, you haven't got it yet because it's deeper and deeper and deeper. And the more deep you get in, the more it has actual effect on who you are and how you behave and whether there's a geula.
I
I'm
wanted
only not.
I wanted to add that, when we go toward the humble and humility, that might not feel so comfortable, but it's actually Hashem putting us on course. And when we fizzle ourselves and actually sort of take that hit, or the ego takes the hit, then there's something more we can discover about Hashem and his world, and that's revealed to us that can bring a certain more capabilities of ourselves out.
Yes, the capabilities become infinite the deeper you go. Yeah, that's it. That's why, you asked the question, where does das begin? It begins with hakna, with humility. Now, you mentioned that it's painful. It can be painful, or at least I'm not looking for it, or something happened and I have to. But that's the way it is with everything. That's the way it everything.
Right, totally.
Yeah, that's the way it is. And these are the mashalim, the famous, you squeeze the grape, you squeeze the olive, you squeeze the grape, and you get wine, and you get simcha from wine. You squeeze the olive, you get oil, and you get fire on a wick. That's Hanukkah. So we got all that. We were supposed to come to that every year, and we'll get another opportunity because, first of all, I don't know about you, but I find, to me, this, every time I sit down, I've learned this mimer more than once, and it's new. Because Torah Chadashim Ita Teitze, it's an expression, a new Torah goes out from you. So just like God is enlivening, machadish, he's renewing every single creature and every single subatomic particle every moment, he's also renewing our relationship with him, our relationship to Torah, and it's infinite. So it can, every time, as I say, there's always something that I've read it before, I've even probably could say it in my mouth, but sort of seeing it here, So it should have that feeling. And of course, it only comes if you, so I'm, okay, so I just want to just, can I assume that if you're not talking like we're talking now, that you're comfortable with it and there's something, and it's meaningful?
The reason I'm not
assuming?
talking is because it's tax week and I've been here since 5:30 in the morning and I haven't had a
All
break,
right.
and I'll be here till midnight. So that's unfortunately why I can only half listen, because I've been here for about 14 hours so far working.
All right,
No,
well, I
16 hours so far working.
I appreciate that, because at least I know that you're there. And
And no, I'm trying to do returns that don't involve a lot of concentration so I can concentrate.
Okay.
But sometimes you get distracted, so I'm trying my best.
Okay, beautiful. Okay, so shall we continue? Yes, we should continue. Let me see if I can find the place. Okay. Okay, it's in the second column. We're in the second column. We flipped the page, and we're on Ice Gimel, and we're on the second column, and we're counting down from the top. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 11, 12, 13. 13 begins. The line begins with halechem. the bread, the bread. So we're recapitulating here that just like the bread that you eat, that a kid eats, any person eats, but we're talking about a transition point in consciousness where the bread, the grain, is going to be an infusion of something that affects this change in consciousness from a tinuk to the next stage. Okay, and it's from the spark which is in it, which is in the grain, which that spark has that capability because it came from this very deep level called Olam HaTohu, which is the level higher than Das, which is Bechina Shalamayla Das, higher than Das, deeper than Das, Das HaMusag, deeper, I said the same thing before, deeper than graspable understanding or not graspable knowledge. Lamayla Me'Chochma, and where is it? It's even higher than Chochma. In the Seder, in the scheme of the Seder Stalshalis, Das is lower, but on the scheme of the lower it is, the higher its source, Das is rooted higher, even higher than Chochma. And higher than Chochma gets into Keser. Therefore, because it comes from the higher place, it can be drawn down to the lower place, even lower than graspable understanding. Things that you know in your bones, so to speak, lower than graspable understanding. My bones know. The alkane, therefore, hiskashus chazik ma'oid, therefore, its tie, connection, is very great. A knowledge in your bones, in your, your neurons, chromosomes. T'moikane, similarly, be'inin achilas matzos, when you eat matzos, the matzah, the matzah, which in the Zohar is called the bread of faith, because amuna, faith, has to do with recognition, seeing, and that's another factor of das, the hadas, the hiskashrus. Here we go, hakora. Das is recognizing something, it's being tied to something, and having a feeling for something. In HaKodesh Baruch Hu, and here what's the something? The Holy One, blessed be He. B'chol Yisrael ma'aminim shehem levadeh, ma'aminim shehu levadehu, and all the Jews know that with their emunah, not with their seichel, but with their emunah, that He alone is. It's just a fact. He is alone now, just as He was before the world was created. Because I could see it was written, Ani Hashem la shenisi, I am Hashem, I haven't changed. Everything about change is something He does. He is not about change. He is not about time. He's not about before and after. As the Rambam says, He is that which preceded all preceding things. He always is. So He's in a category by Himself. Changes don't change Him. Okay, and that perception, that living with that state of consciousness, right? Yeah, is nimsha umislabish b'chinas emuna. Where is that consciousness? Where is the resonant place for that consciousness? It's in emuna. V'lakach, and therefore hamatzah hu michlei hamanuta, and that's why the Zohar calls matzah food of emuna. So we're getting this. When you're eating this, I'm eating this matzah. If I were eating it with intentionality, with kavanah, I would be eating it with the intentionality that I'm taking a certain kind of remedy. It's a remedy. This matzah is a piece of food which is fostering and nourishing my emunah. It's healing my lack of emunah. And if I eat it that way, that's what the matzah is doing, he says. That's what matzah on Pesach does. I mean, it is interesting to know. This is a passing thought. Just, I didn't grow up religious, and the only holiday that I remember really getting around the table with my mostly secular and conservative was Pesach. We had a Seder. We believed enough to come and eat that dry matzah and have that meal, even though we weren't, quote, religious. Okay, so matzah here is a food of faith. It feeds faith. It nourishes faith. Sherei lechem, because bread, sheshoshem b'bechina zu, which comes from, again, olam hatoihu, etc. As we explained earlier, in how a small child has to can't call to father, call out, just call to father without understanding, just calling out to the father, right? Al yidei halachem, until he tastes a taste of bread. Eloshezehu behaskolas inyan olam hazeh. This that is according to the understanding of the existence in this world, shenimshach mehalachem gashmi, which comes from physical bread. In other words, this ability to call your father, this state of recognition of your father, the analogy being your father in heaven, but of your physical father is the physical way things roll out down here, eating grain. But matzah brings to the table something else, which is the mitzvah, which now it's your eating to have recognition of your father in heaven. Jonathan, your hand is up. Yeah.
Rabbi, interesting that you note that, because the physical recognition of your father, Abba, through eating a physical grain, yet the question of irrational or rational commandment for eating matzah, which has no leaven whatsoever, right?
Mm-hmm. Right.
The implication that you have understanding and hakara of something so far above your physical need and so far above the rational discourse.
Correct.
And I shouldn't say above the rational discourse, because it depends how we define rational, but it's interesting because even that thin crisp of matzah, the thin bitness of matzah, which we're commanded to eat, it symbolizes the hakara of something so far above ourselves.
Correct.
You mentioned the Abba that's by Shemayim.
And that's what he's about to mention. Thank you. Amnam balechem de matzah, when you eat the bread of matzah on Pesach, nimshichem eslabish, where there's drawn down and enclosed a koyach, a power, bebechinas eretz elyona, from the supernal earth, shemimeni yetzid lechem hamamshik bechinas zu belakus, which is a level which we call earth, but it's a place of growth where it comes out and there's sprouts, hamshachad are coming down of elokus, of godliness, mamish. Sheyeda likra es ava sheba shemayim. We eat matzah. You eat bread, you can call your father. You recognize your father. You eat matzah, you recognize your Abba Sheba Shemayim, your Father in heaven. Be'eskashris chazaka, with a tremendous tying together. Ad mitzui hanefesh, to the squeezing out of the soul, the wanting to be, into the place that says to just roll into the lap of your father. Minu nefesh, mitzui nefesh. Even though you don't understand this at all. So this has been a definition of bittul. Okay? We could chazer over. Well, let me ask you. Well, let's ask it. I'm going to ask you now. How would you describe it? What is bittul? What have we learned?
Can I respond, or should I raise hand?
Yeah, please.
Well, bittul, interesting. Bittul me, the bittul, handing ourselves over to a recognition of Kadosh Baruch Hu, or the I would say the bittul of ourselves, or the cancellation of ourselves, and an ego is a nice cliche of saying it, but really it is part of the cancellation of our ego. And it's interesting that you mentioned matzah, because matzah is the most unassuming of foods.
Right, well, that's what he said, actually.
It rise.
So bittul is, I like that, unassuming.
Unassuming and doesn't rise. There's nothing. There's no yeast in it to cause it to rise. And as we say, gava and hubris is one of those forming of causing it to rise. The most humble of foods, but in that most humble of foods is this spark
is the highest spark.
Highest spark.
Beautiful. Anybody else? Thank you. Bittul. Okay.
I was just gonna say one thing. Sorry.
Sure.
So is humbling and putting yourself aside, like putting the ego aside, it's a sense of surrendering or to Hashem, and I guess being conscious of that.
Yes. Yeah, yeah. Well, I thought you were asking. You're saying this is kind of what bittul is to you, surrendering to Hashem and being conscious of that. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. Something about the word surrender bothers me now. It's like you're at gunpoint.
It's
Oh, I see. Yeah, maybe that's not appropriate.
We just
That's not right.
change one word. But yeah, but you're right.
I'm thinking of like hod, maybe. Hod is more like a acknowledgement, surrendering to what is. But I
Mhm.
guess, yeah, humility and bittul is like kind of like you're nothing.
How about release? Release? Would that be better?
Release.
Release of the self, letting go of the
Yeah, maybe that's a better way to say it.
or
Letting
breaking through. How about
go,
breaking through? That's what we're
releasing.
talking about. The big breakthrough. That's a breaking through the boundaries, the matzos, breaking through the boundaries. That's another way of looking at it. Yeah, but you got that. That's the essence of it. Bittul.
Hmm.
Good.
And also, Rabbi, if I may be so bold, during the most minimal of physical manifestation, like the matzah, right, is showing the otherworldliness, as we mentioned, bittul,
Yeah,
right,
it's good.
spiritual, and the reduction in the most physical limitations, as you would previously mention, the shrine of the limitations from the physical world, the most minute to physical, most unassuming, is
Right.
symbolic, or it implicates the highest of the spiritual.
That makes it very fitting why it costs so much.
The matzah,
Yeah, it's very unassuming. It contains all this power.
that's a great advertisement.
Let's see. Okay, is good. Thank you, guys. Umezeh nimshach, and from this is drawn gamkin also the level which we call bottle or tzainika, to nullify your will. One is just the muna, and then is conscious taking hold of, I want this, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to mavatal my, as you said, Jonathan, it's sort of a trivial thing, but we'll call it an ego. I'm going to let go of that. My will, my egotistical will, no, I'm going to go for your will. And that ubechina shiftless and the loweredness, which is expressed by the poet, David, the nafshi ka'ofer l'chol tihiyeh, and my soul is like dust in front of everybody. Now that's the one that usually gets really misunderstood. The one that's seemed, as you said before, like you're or implied in one way to me, sort of the painfulness, you're putting yourself aside, you're negative, that my soul should be like dust. They're even we brought in Tanya and other places, sayings of sages from years ago who did punish their body. That's a whole school of asceticism, right? And anyone can walk over me, right? I should be like Willie says, like dust or like a carpet, and people walk over me. But that isn't the way it is. It's just like I'm so I've got so much space for everybody, that that's my lowness. I'm not full of myself. I have space for others. Okay. Beginner's bittul. Zeh beginner's bittul. Okay, we said this. And this is the power of the koyach of the earth. Shememene yaitse lechem, from which comes, you see, now he gives a lot of credit. Credit is due to the earth. If you're going to say that the highest falls to the lowest, as I said earlier, the earth is really where it's at, earthbound things. But, plants are attached. So plants and earth, have a nice combination to nourish the higher levels. Right. Okay. So he said, so my soul should be like dust to everything. Then this is the power of the earth, from which comes bread. And that's the end of this ois. The end of this. Let's see, what do we have? We have one more class, don't we?
Well, also the earth is the most humble of
The most
places
humble of it all. Yes.
because we're constantly treading on it.
Right.
And it doesn't
That's-
say anything.
That was our expression. My soul should be like offer, like the
Ah,
earth. You know?
I see.
It says nothing. It has no voice, but it has all the power. If it weren't for the planet, you know, this life that we call our lives, the physical life, wouldn't be able to be sustained. I mean, it's pretty stupid. I mean, a lot obvious, right? So, but nobody thinks too much. You know, we think about, you know, well, I don't get natural resources and whether they'll last or not. But what's really is what about those natural resources? What makes them so valuable? It's because of the highest, the godly highest that's in it. So that's what, if we focus on that, we have less trouble with which technology to use. Anyway, I don't know.
Rabbi, may I interject? We said interesting.
Pontificating.
One
What?
thing just interesting what you mentioned. The highest comes from, you know, the earth, the minerals, everything. The highest comes from it. You know, that's an interesting point that you made. And I don't remember what now I was thinking, but I just lost it. But there was an there. You know,
Okay. Yeah, the lowest is invested in the lowest is the highest, is the deepest.
yeah, but it's interesting. It also bugs the question is when Hashem created that material base, you know, the Yivatzut, or the create that utilization of that material base to rise to the highest. And we ask this teleological question, why did Hashem need to do? And I asked that question years ago to bestow his goodness so his creatures would recognize him. I mean,
Why did he need to do that?
why? Yeah, that's the question. What was the reason to, you know, why would
Did
he
anybody
the
answer
physical
your
world,
question?
he alienated himself in the physical world to create that? I mean, I don't want to use an anthropomorphic term like the process. It's not exactly anthropomorphism, but a process where the spirit imbibes, creates the physical, and then there's a dialect or an interaction between the.
So, Jonathan, did anyone give you an answer to your question?
No, they said to me years ago. I mean, the answer I got years ago when I asked the question is because Hashem wanted to bestow His goodness. He wanted to create something, and it's like. And then I asked the question.
All right,
Make
I'm gonna put you aside. I'm gonna put you aside, but I'm not gonna forget about it. That's a topic in itself. You know, what's it all about from Hashem's perspective? But I mean, I just, in the sense of conserving time, I think, you know, the answer to that ultimately, the answer is he wanted to. And that's the way, as far as I know, that's as far as it gets, as far as I know. And for a good reason, because you don't, when you ask somebody, why do you want this? I mean, I don't know. It's just the way I am. You know, I want this. So that's just the way he is. He wants to have a creation. And he wants there to be more light than before. But they say it in Yiddish, frek nicht kein kashes auf a taiva. Don't ask any questions on a desire. That's all I can say. Good night, till we meet again. Bye-bye.
Senator Clark, thank you so much.
Okay, take care.
Thank you, Rabbi. Great share.